The American food landscape is changing faster than most people realize. While we're busy arguing about our favorite drive-through orders and debating which pizza chain reigns supreme, some of the most familiar names in dining are quietly disappearing from street corners across the country. These aren't the dramatic closures that make headlines or the bankruptcy announcements that flood social media. Instead, these are the slow, silent deaths that happen when corporate headquarters go quiet. Franchise owners walk away and loyal customers show up one day to find empty storefronts and darkened signs. What we're witnessing isn't just another economic downturn hitting the restaurant industry. This is something deeper, something more permanent. Rising operational costs, shifting consumer habits, and years of mismanagement have created a perfect storm that's claiming victims most people assumed were untouchable. The brands we're about to discuss once served millions of Americans every week. They had prime real estate, devoted followings, and seemed like permanent fixtures in our dining culture. But permanence is an illusion in the food business, and 2025 is shaping up to be a year of reckoning for chains that have been living on borrowed time. Number 5. Boston Market. Boston Market built its reputation on the promise of home-style comfort food without the hassle of cooking it yourself. For decades, families relied on their rotisserie chicken dinners, creamy mac and cheese, and that distinctive blend of herbs and spices that made even the pickiest eaters happy. The red and yellow signs were as common as traffic lights in suburban shopping centers, and the brand seemed bulletproof in its simplicity. But behind those familiar storefronts, a financial disaster has been brewing for years. Boston Market isn't just struggling with the usual restaurant industry challenges. The chain is drowning in a sea of lawsuits, unpaid bills, and operational failures that have turned what should be a straightforward business model into a legal nightmare. The trouble started with wage theft allegations that spread across multiple states. Workers began filing complaints about unpaid overtime, missed paychecks, and benefits that never materialized. What began as isolated incidents quickly snowballed into class action lawsuits that painted a picture of systematic mismanagement at the corporate level. Former employees described working conditions where paychecks bounced, health insurance was promised but never provided, and managers were forced to choose between paying staff and keeping the lights on. These weren't minor accounting errors or temporary cash flow problems. Internal documents revealed a pattern of deliberate wage theft that affected thousands of workers across hundreds of locations. The legal costs alone have been staggering, but the damage to the brand's reputation has been even worse. Word travels fast in the restaurant industry, and when potential employees start warning each other about a particular chain, staffing problems become impossible to solve. The staffing crisis has created a vicious cycle that Boston Market can't seem to break. Understaffed locations provide poor service, which drives away customers, which reduces revenue, which makes it harder to pay competitive wages, which makes staffing problems worse. Many locations have been forced to reduce their hours or close on certain days of the week simply because they don't have enough people to operate. Meanwhile, suppliers have grown increasingly reluctant to work with the chain. Multiple food distributors have filed liens against Boston Market locations for unpaid invoices, and some have stopped delivering entirely until their accounts are settled. When a restaurant can't reliably stock basic ingredients like chicken and vegetables, the business model falls apart completely. The mass closures started quietly in secondary markets where Boston Market had less brand recognition, but they've steadily spread to major metropolitan areas. Entire regions have seen their Boston Market locations vanish within months of each other, leaving behind empty spaces in strip malls and disappointed customers who relied on the chain for quick family dinners. What makes Boston Market's situation particularly tragic is that the fundamental concept remains sound. Americans still want convenient home-style meals, and the rotisserie chicken model has proven successful for other chains. But years of mismanagement, legal troubles, and financial instability have damaged the brand beyond repair. Even locations that are still operating often feel like they're running on fumes, with limited menu options, outdated equipment, and staff who know their jobs might disappear at any moment. Number 4. Quiznos. The rise and fall of Quiznos reads like a business school case study in how quickly success can turn into disaster. At its peak in the mid-2000s, Quiznos operated over 5,000 locations worldwide and seemed positioned to challenge Subway's dominance in the sub-sandwich market. Their toasted subs were genuinely different from the competition, offering warm, melted ingredients and a premium positioning that justified higher prices. The brand's early marketing was brilliant, creating a cult-like following with memorable commercials and a clear value proposition. Customers were willing to pay extra for the superior taste and quality, and the franchise model appeared to be a money-making machine for both corporate and individual store owners. But success bred overconfidence, and Quiznos began making decisions that would eventually destroy the entire network. The company's franchise agreements became increasingly predatory, forcing store owners to purchase supplies exclusively through corporate-approved vendors at inflated prices. While this boosted short-term profits for headquarters, it made it nearly impossible for individual locations to remain profitable. Franchise owners found themselves trapped in contracts that guaranteed failure. They were required to buy everything from meat and cheese to napkins and cleaning supplies through Quiznos-approved distributors that charged significantly more than what the same products cost elsewhere. When franchisees complained or tried to negotiate better terms, corporate responded with legal threats and contract enforcement actions. The breaking point came when food costs began rising across the industry. Subway and other competitors were able to adjust their supply chains and maintain competitive pricing, but Quiznos franchisees were locked into expensive supplier relationships that made price competition impossible. Many locations were forced to choose between maintaining quality and staying profitable, and most chose survival over excellence. The brand's reputation for superior sandwiches began to erode as individual locations cut corners to stay afloat. Customers noticed smaller portions, lower quality ingredients, and higher prices, but corporate headquarters seemed more focused on extracting fees from struggling franchisees than addressing the underlying problems. Franchise owners began walking away from their investments rather than continuing to operate at a loss. Some simply closed their doors and abandoned their locations, while others tried to convert their restaurants into different concepts. The corporate response was to pursue legal action against these departing franchisees, a move that only generated more negative publicity and discouraged potential new operators from joining the system. Today, finding an operating Quiznos location has become something of a treasure hunt. The chain that once boasted thousands of stores now operates fewer than 200 locations in the United States, and many of those are struggling to survive. The few remaining stores often feel like museum pieces from a different era, with outdated decor and limited menu options that barely resemble the premium brand that once challenged industry giants. What makes Quiznos particularly tragic is that their core product was genuinely superior to most competitors. The toasted sandwich concept was innovative and delicious, but corporate greed and short-sighted franchise policies destroyed a brand that could have remained a major player in the industry for decades. Number 3. O'Charley's. Drive through any mid-sized southern city today, and you'll notice something unsettling. Where O'Charley's restaurants once anchored shopping plazas and served as gathering spots for families celebrating birthdays and business deals, empty buildings now sit with faded signs and overgrown parking lots. The casual dining chain that once defined Southern hospitality for millions of customers is quietly vanishing from the landscape, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. O'Charley's built its reputation on a simple promise: quality American fare served in a comfortable atmosphere where everyone felt welcome. Their honey butter croissants became legendary, arriving warm at every table before customers even ordered. The menu struck that perfect balance between familiar comfort foods and slightly upscale presentations that made ordinary Tuesday nights feel special. For 2 decades, O'Charley's seemed to understand exactly what Middle America wanted from a dining experience. The chain's golden years coincided with the casual dining boom of the 1990s and early 2000s, when families had disposable income for regular restaurant visits and competing entertainment options were limited. O'Charley's locations were consistently busy, especially during weekend evenings when the wait for a table often stretched to an hour or more. The brand expanded aggressively during this period, opening new locations across the Southeast and Midwest, with confidence that seemed entirely justified by their success. But the casual dining industry began shifting beneath O'Charley's feet, and the chain struggled to adapt to changing consumer preferences. Younger diners started gravitating toward fast casual concepts that offered better quality food in less time, while older customers began cooking more meals at home as their discretionary spending decreased. The sweet spot that O'Charley's had occupied for so many years was disappearing, and management seemed unsure how to respond. The company's attempts at modernization felt half-hearted and confused. Menu revamps that added trendy items like quinoa bowls and craft cocktails alienated longtime customers without attracting new ones. Restaurant redesigns that attempted to create a more contemporary atmosphere often resulted in spaces that felt generic rather than welcoming. Most critically, O'Charlie's failed to develop a compelling digital strategy as competitors invested heavily in mobile ordering, delivery partnerships, and social media engagement. Corporate communication with franchisees and employees became increasingly sporadic and vague. Quarterly meetings that once provided clear direction and strategic vision turned into damage control sessions where executives offered few concrete solutions to declining sales and rising operational costs. Many longtime employees described a sense of abandonment, as if headquarters had already written off large portions of the chain while publicly maintaining optimism about the brand's future. The closures began in smaller markets where O'Charlie's locations had always been marginal performers, but the pattern quickly spread to core markets where the brand had deep roots. Entire metropolitan areas lost their last O'Charlie's locations within months of each other, often with little advance notice to employees or customers. The corporate silence surrounding these closures has been deafening, with official statements limited to generic phrases about optimizing the portfolio and focusing on profitable markets. What makes O'Charlie's decline particularly heartbreaking is the genuine affection many customers still feel for the brand. Social media posts about restaurant closures consistently generate hundreds of comments from people sharing memories of family celebrations, first dates, and business dinners that happened at O'Charlie's locations. These aren't just customers mourning the loss of a convenient dining option. They're mourning the loss of a place that held real significance in their lives. The few remaining O'Charlie's locations often feel like they're operating in limbo, with shortened hours, limited menu options, and staff who seem uncertain about their long-term employment prospects. Regular customers describe a palpable sense of decline, from worn furniture that isn't being replaced to signature menu items that have been quietly discontinued without explanation. Number 2, Fuddruckers. The name Fuddruckers once commanded respect in the burger world. Their bold promise of serving the world's greatest hamburgers wasn't just marketing hyperbole. It was backed up by a genuinely superior product that set them apart from typical fast food chains. The concept was revolutionary for its time. Fresh beef ground daily in-house, buns baked fresh every morning, and a toppings bar where customers could customize their burgers exactly to their liking. Walking into Fuddruckers during their heyday felt like entering a burger lover's paradise. The aroma of fresh ground beef sizzling on the grill, mixed with the smell of bread baking in on-site ovens, created a sensory experience that no other chain could match. The open kitchen design let customers watch their burgers being prepared, building anticipation and confidence in the quality of their meal. The elaborate toppings bar, stocked with everything from basic lettuce and tomatoes to exotic salsas and specialty cheeses, turned every visit into a customizable adventure. But their commitment to quality came with operational complexities that proved difficult to scale and maintain. Each location required significant space for grinding equipment, industrial ovens, and extensive prep areas. The labor-intensive process of grinding beef and baking bread daily meant higher staffing costs and more opportunities for inconsistency between locations. While customers appreciated the superior product, many franchise owners struggled with the operational demands and higher costs that came with their system. The brand's expansion strategy during the 1990s prioritized growth over quality control, leading to inconsistent experiences that damaged customer loyalty. Some locations maintained the high standards that made them special, while others cut corners on ingredients, preparation methods, and maintenance. Customers who had fallen in love with one location might have a disappointing experience at another, creating confusion about what the brand actually represented. As the fast casual segment exploded with concepts like Five Guys and Shake Shack, they found themselves caught in an uncomfortable middle ground. The newer chains offered many of the same quality benefits with more streamlined operations and faster service. Their elaborate preparation process, once a source of pride, began to feel slow and cumbersome compared to competitors who could deliver similar quality in half the time. The economic pressures of the 2008 recession hit them particularly hard. Their higher operational costs and premium pricing made them vulnerable when consumers began cutting back on dining expenses. Many locations were forced to compromise on their signature quality standards to reduce costs, but this only accelerated customer defections to cheaper alternatives that didn't pretend to offer premium experiences. Corporate ownership changes brought cost-cutting initiatives that undermined the very qualities that made Fuddruckers special. The requirement for fresh ground beef was relaxed at many locations, bread baking was outsourced to reduce labor costs, and the elaborate toppings bars were simplified to reduce waste and maintenance. Each compromise made economic sense individually, but collectively they destroyed the unique value proposition that justified their premium pricing. The franchise network began fragmenting as operators struggled with declining sales and increasing corporate fees. Some successful franchise groups maintained multiple locations and continued to uphold brand standards, but many individual operators walked away from their investments rather than continue operating at a loss. The corporate response was often litigation rather than support, creating adversarial relationships that further destabilized the system. Today, finding an operating Fuddruckers location requires careful research and often considerable travel. The chain that once operated over 200 locations now has fewer than 30 restaurants in the United States, most operated by a handful of dedicated franchise groups who have managed to maintain profitability in specific markets. These surviving locations often feel like time capsules, offering glimpses of what made them special, while serving as reminders of how quickly a successful concept can fade into irrelevance. The tragedy of Fuddruckers isn't that they failed to innovate, but that they innovated too early and then failed to evolve when the market caught up to their vision. Number 1. Corner Bakery Cafe. Corner Bakery Cafe once represented everything Americans wanted from a quick-service dining experience. The warm, inviting atmosphere combined the comfort of a neighborhood bakery with the convenience of fast casual service. Fresh-baked breads, handcrafted sandwiches, and steaming bowls of soup created an oasis for busy professionals and families seeking something better than typical chain food. The aroma of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee drew customers in, while the promise of wholesome, made-to-order meals kept them coming back week after week. The concept seemed bulletproof during its expansion years. Corner bakery locations anchored upscale shopping centers and business districts, serving breakfast pastries to morning commuters and hearty lunches to office workers seeking refuge from corporate cafeterias. The brand positioned itself perfectly between expensive sit-down restaurants and cheap fast food options, offering quality ingredients and comfortable seating at reasonable prices. But beneath the surface of freshly baked bread and carefully crafted marketing messages, Corner Bakery Cafe was struggling with fundamental business model flaws that would eventually prove fatal. The labor-intensive nature of their operations required skilled bakers and prep cooks who commanded higher wages than typical fast food employees. Each location needed expensive equipment for baking, extensive prep space for sandwich assembly, and longer preparation times that limited throughput during peak hours. The brand's commitment to freshness became a financial burden as food costs rose and labor shortages made skilled positions difficult to fill. Many locations struggled to maintain consistent quality as corporate pressure to reduce costs conflicted with the artisanal image that attracted customers. The gap between what Corner Bakery promised and what many locations could actually deliver began widening, creating disappointed customers who shared their negative experiences through online reviews. Corporate social media and ownership changes brought aggressive cost-cutting measures that stripped away many of the qualities that made Corner Bakery special. Portion sizes decreased while prices increased, creating a value proposition that no longer made sense to budget-conscious consumers. Menu simplification eliminated popular items without replacing them with compelling alternatives, leaving longtime customers feeling abandoned and new customers uninspired. The franchise network began showing signs of strain as operators faced declining sales and increasing corporate fees. Many franchise owners found themselves trapped between maintaining brand standards that were becoming financially unsustainable and cutting corners that damaged customer satisfaction. The corporate response was often punitive rather than supportive, creating adversarial relationships that further destabilized the entire system. When the bankruptcy filing came, it surprised few industry insiders who had watched corner bakeries' decline accelerate over previous months. Suppliers had grown increasingly reluctant to extend credit terms. Employees were jumping ship for more stable opportunities, and customers were migrating to competitors that offered better value or more convenient service. The liquidation process moved swiftly, with most locations closing within weeks of the announcement. Today, the Corner Bakery Cafe brand exists primarily as a cautionary tale about how quickly consumer preferences can shift and how dangerous it can be to build a business model around labor-intensive processes in an increasingly cost-conscious market. The empty storefronts that once housed bustling cafe locations now serve as silent reminders of a concept that promised so much, but ultimately couldn't adapt to the realities of modern restaurant economics. The few remaining locations operate under different ownership structures or have been converted to entirely different restaurant concepts, but the Corner Bakery name has essentially vanished from the American dining landscape. What once seemed like a permanent fixture in upscale shopping centers has become just another example of how even successful restaurant concepts can disappear almost overnight when the fundamentals stop working. These 5 chains represent more than just business failures or economic casualties. They embody the dreams of entrepreneurs who believed they could create something lasting, the livelihoods of thousands of employees who built careers around these brands, and the memories of millions of customers who trusted these restaurants to be part of their daily lives. Their disappearance reflects broader changes in how Americans eat, shop, and spend their time. But it also reveals the brutal economics of an industry where success can evaporate faster than morning coffee. The restaurant business has always been unforgiving, but the challenges facing today's chains are unprecedented in their scope and intensity. Rising labor costs, supply chain disruptions, changing consumer habits, and increased competition from delivery apps have created an environment where even established brands struggle to survive. The chains we've discussed tonight were casualties of these forces, but they won't be the last. As you drive through your neighborhood over the coming months, pay attention to the restaurant signs that have become so familiar you barely notice them anymore. Some of those names might not be there much longer. The American dining landscape is being rewritten in real time, and the next chapter might not include some of the brands you've taken for granted your entire life. The writing is already on the wall, and 2025 is going to be the year these predictions become reality. What we've just walked through isn't speculation or fear-mongering. These are documented patterns, financial realities, and business failures that have been building for years. Boston Market's legal troubles, Quiznos' predatory franchise model, O'Charley's corporate abandonment, Fuddrucker's operational complexity, and Corner Bakery's unsustainable economics all point to the same inevitable conclusion. The restaurant industry is experiencing a fundamental shift that goes beyond typical economic cycles. Consumer expectations have evolved, operational costs have skyrocketed, and the margin for error has essentially disappeared. The brands that thrived in previous decades built their success on assumptions that no longer hold true. Cheap labor, predictable supply chains, and loyal customer bases were the foundation of their business models, but all 3 have crumbled. If there's a restaurant on this list that holds special meaning for you, don't wait to visit. These closures happen fast and without warning. One day the lights are on, the next day there's a sign in the window thanking customers for their years of loyalty. The American dining landscape is being rewritten, and some chapters are ending whether we're ready or not.